Hello and welcome to Lecture 4 on William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. We're over the hump, only 3 lectures remaining. Of course, I may have to divide some of these lectures into parts, but let's be optimistic. Let's confront that problem if we have to. Before we turn to Act 3, I thought I'd mentioned it last night after the lecture, after putting the lecture online. Suddenly the winds of nostalgia began whispering in my ears. I'd been discussing, I'd mentioned Cinderella in the last lecture, and so I watched the Rodgers and Hammerstein's version of Cinderella, which I had seen when I was a young boy. I think I was about 10 or 11, and I watched it with my baby sister at the time. And I have a sentimental side, obviously. But I was struck once again by how the Cinderella story presents this romantic view of love, and particularly the romantic view of falling in love at first sight. And that's another problem, I would argue, that the lovers confront in the play. Because it reveals something, it reveals once again the true nature of true love. Though the lovers are not aware of what's really going on, they imagine being romantics, they imagine that they have indeed fallen in love at first sight. If you hear someone use that expression, I fell in love at first sight, well, you know he or she is a romantic. And again, the idea is that lovers are destined to find one another, and each of the lovers is unique and special, and these two, this pair is meant to be together because they immediately recognize that uniqueness in the other. And so it doesn't take long. At first sight, the two are head over heels in love, desirous of one another. And I recall, I watched the scene last night where Cinderella appears, where she arrives at the ball, and she's at the top of the stairs, and the prince looks up, and she sees him, and he sees her, and instantly they fall in love. It's love at first sight. You can see it in their faces. You can see it in the faces of Cindy and PC, Prince Charming. Interesting, Prince Charming doesn't have a name, does he? But at any rate, so they begin dancing, and the dance, of course, is symbolic of the courting ritual, the courtship that the lovers experience, that they undergo. And they dance around the ballroom, and everyone is watching, and then they dance out to the balcony where they're alone. They find a private space to whisper in one another's ears. Well, they actually break out into song. The first song they sing together is 10 minutes ago I met you. It's the idea that 10 minutes ago I met you and I'm already smitten. I'm head over heels. They each imagine that they're dancing with an angel, and they're no longer dancing on the balcony, but they're dancing in the skies, this idea of love at first sight. But Rodgers and Hammerstein, they're savvy enough to know that this idea of love at first sight, this romantic understanding of falling in love at the moment you meet that special soulmate that is destined for you, they're smart enough to realize that they call that idea into question, don't they? The second song that Cinderella and the prince sing is they're questioning. They begin to question if what they're experiencing is real. And I wrote down what I felt was the most significant lines from that song. The first line is, "Do I love you?" They each ask the other, "Do I love you because you're wonderful?" And the second line, "Or are you wonderful because I love you?" Do I love you because you're wonderful, or are you wonderful because I love you? Am I drawn to you? Am I attracted to you because you are worthy of that attraction, that attention? Are you wonderful? And here, wonderful, are you to be wondered at? I would imagine, are you, what do I know, really, what do I know about you? What kind of person are you? What kind of character do you have? Are you a person of integrity, a person of character? Are you worthy of my respect? Do I love you? Is that why I've fallen in love with you at first sight? Because you are wonderful, you are worthy of my respect, my love, my devotion, my desire? Or are you wonderful because I love you? Am I being fooled? Has my imagination run wild? Am I seeing someone wonderful because I desire to see you that way, because I am attracted to you? Because if you think about it, the realist is going to argue this idea of love at first sight, it certainly is suspect, isn't it? What do you really know about a person if you meet someone and at first sight you've fallen in love? And yet many people will swear up and down that that's what happened to them. It was love at first sight. But no, the realist is going to say, no, it was sex at first sight. You were attracted sexually to this individual. And it was ego at first sight. You desired this person because attaining this person would mean that you would be the winner. It would feed your ego. And you also want this person to be attracted to you, to find you unique and special, important, because that too feeds your ego. And then again, it's also culture at first sight, because remember, the culture brainwashes us all. It tells us that your life, a life without love, well, if you never experience love in life, then your life is a tragedy indeed. I'm always reminded of the lines by Alfred Lloyd Tennyson, yes. Better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. It's the idea, love and loss, the suffering, the great joy that comes with love, the suffering, ultimately the cost, losing that love is ultimately worth. It's ultimately of more value than never to have loved at all, never to have experienced that emotion. And that certainly is not the realistic view that says that what is of most value is suffering. And the realist would argue that the emotion of love is merely a projected value, that some people are addicted to love, but other people are not. Most people are, but some people aren't. Some people do not want to play the game of love. They're simply not interested in going in that direction, headed down that road. They simply have no desire. So being in love, desiring to be in love, believing that without love, your life is ultimately you are a failure if you've never experienced it, and that is a projected value here. So Tennyson, definitely a romantic, I would argue. But this questioning of this phenomenon, this love at first sight, this romantic notion of love at first sight, it really does underscore again this idea that are we drawn towards someone because that person is special? That person is unique. That person, again, is worthy of our attention. If you turn in the play, let's turn back for a moment to Act 1, Scene 1. I'm on page 1344. And when Helena is alone on stage, she speaks in a soliloquy. And I'm here at line 232. Look what she says here, these lines. Line 232, this is Act 1, Scene 1, and I'm on page 1344 again in your anthology. She says, things base and vile, holding no quantity, love can transpose to form and dignity. Things base and vile. And here, of course, the suggestion of someone who is not deserving of our respect, of our desire, our love. Someone whose character is base and vile, that holds no quantity. The character, the person is not an individual of integrity. And again, I would argue that for Shakespeare, a person of integrity is someone who is rational. Because it's through reasoning. Reasoning is the tool. It's the toolbox itself. There are no other tools. Through reasoning, we arrive at the most important philosophical truth, and that is that suffering is the most valued. And that's what shapes our ethical character. So things base and vile, holding no quantity. So an individual who is not a person of reason, is not ethically, intellectually honest or ethically upright, holding no quantity, no shape, no form, no sense of balance or harmony, someone who is not allowing his reasoning to govern his desires, his needs, or his wants. Things base and vile, holding no quantity, love can transpose to form and dignity. It's under the influence of love. Love is a kind of drug. It's under the influence of love that suddenly we imagine this individual who is basically of no worth, certainly not worthy of our respect. Suddenly we can see someone before us who is of form and dignity. Dignity, of course, means being worthy. If one has dignity, one is worthy of other people's respect. So this emotion we call love can actually transform someone who is of no value. In our eyes, we can see that person who is of worth and of value, who does have character. And the idea of love at first sight, it calls into question, can you really know a person's character at first sight? I mean, what do you really know about this person? Do you know that this person is a rational being? Do you know what kind of character this person has? That's an important question I would argue, to know. She says next, love looks not with the eyes. Notice here love is being personified. Love is doing the looking. It's looking not with the eyes. There is this suggestion here that love is the one that's governing us, our desire, our reason. We're like puppets on a string. Love is the one that's doing the looking. And we're sort of helpless victims under the influence of this drug called love, the emotion of love. Love looks not with the eyes. And the eyes here, of course, the conventional symbol for reason. The eyes, of course, the idea is that you see clearly, you're looking rationally, you're comprehending, you're being sensible here, clear-sighted. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, with the imagination. Here the mind is representing, of course, desire, the imagination, what it is you desire, what it is you sexually desire, your biological needs, your drives, and what it is your ego needs to feed on. This desire to feel in someone else's eyes important and special, and to find someone who, someone you see as special and important too, because again, our culture tells us that you gotta have this experience. Otherwise, you're just a failure. You're a loser. You've missed out on something all important in life. Love is the thing of utmost value. It has real value, not projected value, but real value. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind. And therefore, you can conclude here, she says, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. And Cupid being painted blind, you can go onto the Wikipedia and look at most pictures of Cupid. And he is, most artists draw Cupid as a little cherub figure, a little boy, which suggests, children are not able to reason. They're easily influenced, aren't they? And they're not able to reason. They're not able to. They're still in the process of learning how to do reason, how to be logical. We all are continuously in that process, aren't we? But the idea that Cupid is painted blind, that he isn't seeing clearly, he isn't looking with the eyes symbolic of reason, that he is looking with desire, with the imagination. He is being deluded. Love, and therefore is winged Cupid. Love is looking with the imagination, and winged Cupid is painted blind. That idea that it is about need and want and desire and not about being rational here. And that brings us to this idea of this next problem, as I've just mentioned, this next problem that I think the lovers aren't aware that they're confronting in the play, and that's this idea that when we fall in love, we tend to fall in love with what is really, ultimately, of no quantity, of no value, in comparison with this idea of a person's character or integrity, their ability to be rational, and therefore their being able to develop a code of ethics, of principles to live by, in which they strive, they understand the importance of suffering, that it has most value, it has real value, and they strive to be productive in the world by preventing harm. And unfortunately, when lovers meet, this is what they're focused on, this idea of love at first sight. How can they possibly be focused on an individual's character if they know very little about that person? They've just met that person. They've just met their partners, and at first sight already they imagine this person to be of value, to be of worth. And that, if you turn back to page 1340, I'm at line, let's see here, line 52. Again, I'm in Act 1, Scene 1, where here, these lines here, Theseus tells Hermia, he says, remember, Lysander and Demetrius are contending for Hermia's love. They each wish to wed Hermia, and Theseus tells Hermia, he says, Demetrius is a worthy gentleman. There's that word, worthy. Worthy is of value, someone we should respect, someone who is of form and dignity. Dignity means someone, right? This idea, if someone is a person of dignity, they are worthy of our respect. Demetrius is a worthy gentleman. And Hermia retorts, so is Lysander. She believes Lysander is a worthy gentleman. And Theseus agrees. In himself he is. But in this situation, at this moment, wanting your father's voice, here's the situation. Your father prefers Demetrius, not Lysander. But in this kind, wanting your father's voice, the other, Demetrius, must be held the worthier. In other words, Hermia has to listen to what her father's saying. He's the father figure, the authority figure. He's the one who is older and wiser. It's his judgment she should heed. And Aegeus believes that Demetrius is the worthier gentleman. What do Theseus and Hermia and Aegeus, what do they mean by this word worthy and worthier? Well, we find out, don't we, on page 1341, what it means for these young men, for Lysander at least, and I would imagine that all the other men in the play agree with Lysander. At line 99, again, Act 1, Scene 1, on the opposite page here, page 1341, Lysander finally speaks up, and he argues for his position. For he wishes to wed Hermia, and he argues that he is the worthier choice. Look what he says. What makes him worthier? He says at line 99, halfway down the page, I am, my lord, as well derived as he. He's as well derived. He's as well descended, in other words. He comes from just as good a family as Demetrius comes from. I would imagine someone of the upper class, someone of power and wealth and position and influence and privilege. I am, my lord, as well derived as he. And this also the notion, comes from good genes too, doesn't he? This notion of blue blood. Lysander is not, of course, a royal personage, but he is a gentleman. And so this gives him worth, value. I am, my lord, as well derived as he, as well derived as Demetrius, as well possessed. What does he mean by as well possessed? In the marginal note here it says, as well endowed with wealth. So Lysander is arguing, I have just as much money as Demetrius has. And notice he's endowed with wealth. He hasn't earned this money, one can assume here. He hasn't earned it. He's, he's inherited his wealth, his money. And he says he's as well possessed. He argues, my love is more than his. Of course, that idea is suspect, isn't he? How is he to know that his love, his desire, is more than Demetrius' desire? But nevertheless, Lysander also, and of course the whole notion of love is a bit suspect too. By this time, Shakespeare has alerted us to this idea. What is it that Lysander means by love? His need, his sexual need, his ego, his need for, his psychological need for Hermia. My fortunes every way is fairly ranked. So again, this emphasis on his fortunes, his wealth, his money, his position, his future. If not with vantage as Demetrius, he says even I'm just as well off, and my prospects look just as fortunate as Demetrius's, if not even, they look even better than Demetrius's. Notice here what is of most value. In this patriarchal world, what is of most value? Well, of course, men being in the position of power, women have no power, they're seen merely as possessions, so the man certainly, as a practical matter, the man has to have money to support. Lysander has to have the money and to support Hermia, particularly support her in the lifestyle she's accustomed to, because she too is the daughter of Aegeus, who has great influence in the city, wealth and power. And after all, it appears that he and Theseus have a rather close relationship. So this idea of a man's worth being his possessions, his fortunes, his family name, his position in society. He's part of the upper class, right? Part of high society. This is what is of worth. This is what is of value when considering marriage here. It's interesting that that's basically what the men perceive as having most value. This is what is of most worth. And the women, what do they perceive? Well, we know. Lysander says in the next line, and which is more than all these boasts can be, I am beloved of beauteous Hermia. Not just of Hermia, but beauteous Hermia. And here again, I would argue that what can he really know about Hermia? I mean, he's been courting her. It looks to me as if he's been courting her from a distance, from beneath her balcony, and sending her these little trinkets and presents. So what can he really know about her character, about her integrity? But he's focused on her beauty, and here I think he's referring to her physical beauty. And this is what is of value to the women and to the men in this society, this patriarchal, this hierarchical world in which men rule. And again, it's mentioned, if you look on page 1343, still in Act 1, Scene 1, halfway down the page at line 180, when Hermia and Helena meet, notice how they address one another, and notice what their first topic of conversation is. Hermia sees Helena. Helena enters the stage halfway down the page here, and Hermia says, Godspeed, fair Helena. Again, fair Helena. Whither away? And Helena, she hears that word fair, and that's the word that she calls into question here. Call you me fair? That fair again, that fair that you call me, that fair again, unsay. Demetrius loves your fair. Demetrius doesn't appreciate, isn't attracted to me, doesn't find me physically attractive. He finds you so, not me. Demetrius loves your fair. Oh, happy fair. How happy you must be, because your qualities of beauty are what attract Demetrius. And she continues, your eyes are lodestars. Look at the metaphor here. Your eyes are like the brightest stars in the heaven. And Demetrius can't turn his attention. He's naturally drawn to the brightest stars in heaven. They guide him like the lodestars guide the sailors across the seas. Help the sailors to navigate their ways, to not become lost upon the seas. And Demetrius, of course, is guided by Hermia's eyes, which are like lodestars, so he doesn't become lost and confused and turn away from her physical beauty towards something that is to someone who is of no value because they lack that beauty. Your eyes are lodestars, and your tongue sweet air, more tunable than lark to shepherd's ear. Your tongue sweet air, the way you speak, how lovely, the lilt in your voice. It's how pleasing it is. Your tongue sweet air. In fact, it's more tunable than lark to shepherd's ear. And of course, the lark is the conventionally speaking, the lark is the symbol. The lark is the bird of dawn, the bird of promise, the bird of hope, and naturally, it's the lark. The song of the lark is pleasing to the shepherd's ear because the shepherd has been spending all night watching his flock, trying to protect his sheep from the predators, from the wolves that come out at night. So when the shepherd hears the lark, oh, what a sweet sound that is, because it means the day has arrived and the danger has passed here. And that's how Helena imagines Hermia's voice sounds to Demetrius. So again, we have this emphasis on a woman's physical beauty. And I think the realist would argue that this is a real problem for when we fall in love. We tend to fall in love, this idea of falling in love at first sight, it ultimately means that we fall in love with these superficial qualities in another person rather than what is of most importance what we should be drawn to, what is worthy, as I've said, of our respect, of our devotion. And that is a person's ability to be rational, to use reason to guide him or her through life, to help develop this code of principles, a code of ethics, so to know best how to live one's life. This is what's important. This is what is of most value in a person. But this idea, the romantic view of falling in love at first sight, it seems impossible that one can fall in love at first sight with another person's character. Cinderella and Prince Charming, they just met only 10 minutes ago, and they already imagine the other as an angel in disguise. And they're floating, they're dancing in the skies because they found their one true love, who is a special and unique person, and who sees, right? The prince sees Cinderella as special, unique, and Cinderella sees the prince. They're both feeding off each other's egos here. It really is disturbing, this idea that love looks not with the eyes to discern what is really important about another person, but with the mind, with the imagination, with desire, what it wants, what it imagines, the ideal lover, what it dreams of, what it longs for, what the romantic values as most important in another lover, which is revealed in this notion of love at first sight. What is of most importance is a person's physical appearance, or a person's status, a person's wealth, money, position. What is of most importance, is are you sexually attracted to that individual? Imagine someone of great integrity, great character, a principled individual, someone who's upright, someone who's righteous, someone who devotes his or her life to going out into the world and to trying to be the best superhero he or she can be. Imagine that kind of individual. Now imagine that individual wrapped in a package that you don't find appealing, that you don't find sexually desirous. That's rather disturbing, isn't it? That you don't find physically the superficial appearance of that individual. That, in fact, you find it unattractive. It turns you off. Doesn't interest you at all. You want to run from how that person looks, and yet that person is someone, as I've said, who is principled, who is intellectually open and honest, and who is rational, and who is ethically decent. And here again we have this disturbing element that the lovers are not aware of, but that Shakespeare is at pains to point out. He keeps mentioning this idea of worth and what makes an individual worthy, deserving of our respect. In fact, respect, I would say respect trumps love. Remember, love is biased, whereas respect is rational. You respect someone because of that person's character, because of that person's principles. You see that person as essentially logical, rational, and someone who is essentially decent ethically. Someone who has this code that he or she strives to live by, to prevent harm, to try to cure harm if it can't be prevented, and try to reduce it if it can't be cured. I mean, that's the business of life, because what is of most value is this idea of suffering that conscious sentient beings can experience. So in this society we find ourselves in this patriarchal world, women are drawn, and men themselves believe, and women believe that what is of most worth ultimately is this men's position, their power, their influence, their wealth. And there is a great emphasis in our own society on money and its importance in having not just enough to meet one's needs, but to provide, to indulge one, to provide one with all kinds of comforts that one becomes addicted to, particularly in developed nations where we become quite spoiled, quite addicted to, our all sorts of comforts, and without them, we can't imagine life without them. Imagine going back just a century, or just half a century, no air conditioning half a century ago. Oh my, I don't know if that's the kind of life I'd like to live, a world with no air conditioning. But at any rate, that brings us to the magical flower juice and what it represents in the play. And again, remember, I'm arguing that Shakespeare, the play is not endorsing the existence of magical flower juice any more than it's endorsing the existence of fairies. There is no such thing as a magical flower whose juice can, when placed upon the eyelids of someone who's asleep, the juice can have magical effects and cause that individual to fall madly, passionately in love with the first thing he or she sees upon awakening. No, I don't think the play is endorsing that the existence of that kind of magical, that kind of a juice with such magical properties. So what is Shakespeare doing? Again, I would argue that the juice is symbolic. It's symbolic of this idea of falling in love at first sight. Symbolic of this romantic view, falling in love at first sight is somehow magical or mysterious, mystical, something strange is occurring, something that's been destined for, that's been preordained and meant to be, and two soulmates suddenly meet, and all you need is that one moment, and suddenly all in the world is, suddenly you're transformed into an angel. You're in each other's eyes. You both become angels, and you're dancing in the skies. No, that's being called into question. What does the magical juice really represent? Well, it's undermining, of course, this idea of falling in love at first sight, which we've just pointed out. The impossibility, generally speaking, the impossibility of falling in love with an individual's character. If you fall in love at first sight, you've never met that individual, so it's difficult to imagine how you could have a deep comprehension of just who that person is, character-wise. So let's turn to the first instance when the flower juice is used, and that is on Lysander. And let's see, I'm in Act 2. Let's see, I wrote down the line numbers here, if I can find them. Yes, Act 2, Scene 2, and this is on page 1357. At the bottom of the page, line 102. And of course, Puck has accidentally placed the magical flower juice onto Lysander's eyelids while Lysander is sleeping in the woods. Lysander is just a few feet away from Hermia, who too is asleep. And Helena, again, accidentally stumbles, comes across Lysander, and this accident, is it fortuitous? Is it all part of this supernatural plan, the supernatural design? The suggestion here on the surface, of course. No, we know that it's simply by accident that this occurs. It's part of Shakespeare's plot. He's manipulating us here. And Helena, in pursuing Demetrius runs off, and Helena, tired, she can no longer chase Demetrius through the woods. She stumbles upon Lysander, and she turns to him at line 102 and says, "Dead or asleep? I see no blood, no wound." She's wondering if Lysander's been injured. And she doesn't realize, is he dead or is he asleep? Again, this analogy between death and sleep, we'll see this again in Hamlet in his famous "To Be or Not to Be" soliloquy. But dead or asleep, of course, if he's dead, he can no longer be harmed, but asleep, he can be harmed, can't he? He is vulnerable, and Puck has interfered. Of course, Puck is attempting to obey Oberon. He's not purposefully here making mischief, is he? It just happens to turn out that he causes a lot of mischief. But dead or asleep, Lysander is vulnerable. Puck does, Lysander is Puck's victim. Ultimately Oberon's victim. Unintentionally, of course, unwittingly. But Lysander awakes, and under the influence of the magical flower juice, he falls in love at first sight. Again, the romantic notion that this is a mysterious moment that two lovers experience when they see each other. Suddenly they know, they are absolutely certain that this is the person they were destined to meet and to be with. And Lysander awakens, and look, the moment he sees Helena, look what he says. She says, "Lysander, if you live, good sir, awake." And he responds, "And run through fire I will for thy sweet sake." Already he's willing to die for Helena. How great the power of love. This mysterious, magical feeling that you just can't live without, or you're a failure. That's what your culture tells you. You've got to experience this mystery, this magic. "And run through fire I will for thy sweet sake." And then look what he says to Helena. "Transparent Helena, nature shows art, that through thy bosom makes me see thy heart." Fascinating. He imagines nature. Again, he personifies nature as a great artist. That nature has produced this work of art called Helena. That not only is she physically lovely, that through thy bosom, through her physical beauty, she's lovely in every way, physically, on the surface, but through thy bosom makes me see thy heart. So the bosom here, of course, representing her physical beauty, her surface appeal. He's drawn to her physical beauty. He's sexually attracted here. Notice what's happening. Slowly, Shakespeare is going to undermine this idea that falling in love at first sight is a mystery, and that what's really happening, he's undercutting this romantic view, and what's really happening is this sexual desire, this sexual attraction. And here we get an idea of what, for Shakespeare, the magical flower juice represents. For the romantic sitting in the audience, it represents this magical moment, falling in love at first sight. But for the realist sitting in the audience, and I would argue for Shakespeare, it represents something quite literal. It's not a symbol of the notion of falling in love at first sight, but rather it's a literal representation of the sexual hormones. After all, the juice is placed on Lysander's eyelids, and they seep into his eyes, and of course behind the eyes we have the brain. And the notion here is Shakespeare, of course Shakespeare doesn't, in his day and age, they probably didn't have that much scientific knowledge about sexual hormones. But Shakespeare's, perceptive enough to know that it has something to do here in one's imagination, in the brain. Later we'll see Shakespeare, a fascinating phrase he uses in Act 5. He talks about lovers' seething brains. And that's what, that image of seething brains, that's what Lysander's experiencing here. His brain is seething. He's hopped up on chemicals. This is a chemical concoction that's been placed on his eyelids representing the sexual hormones. He's experiencing a kind of hallucination. It's a hallucinatory drug, more powerful than heroin. And he's suddenly addicted. He's sexually drawn. He's sexually attracted. And he's got to have her physically. He desires her sexually. His biology, his brain is just bubbling over it's just boiling over. It's like a Dr. Jekyll lab, and suddenly, all the chemicals are bubbling and boiling over, and suddenly Lysander becomes a Mr. Hyde. The animal is loosed within, and he's got to have her physically. He desires her sexually. And of course, Shakespeare keeps undermining this idea that what Lysander is attracted to is not just her physical beauty, thy bosom, but her heart. Nature shows art that through thy bosom makes me see thy heart. And here the heart, of course, is representing her character, Helena's character, her integrity, her beauty within, her heart. She's a good gal, her heart. But what does Lysander really know about Helena? Does he know anything at all about Helena? I mean, she's Hermia's best friend. I'm sure he's met her to some extent, but I don't know if he knows her enough to form some opinion concerning her character, and he certainly has never seen that or mentioned that before in the play. And of course, we have seen Helena's character. We know how Helena behaves under the influence of her desire for Demetrius. I mean, she rats on her best friend, Hermia, and Hermia's sweetie pie, Lysander, she places her best friend and her best friend's lover in danger by informing Demetrius. After all, Demetrius could have simply gone to Aegeus and to Theseus and informed them that Lysander was going to run off with Hermia. And that would have certainly placed Lysander and Hermia in a precarious position, would have put them at risk. So Hermia, under the influence, of her desires, her needs, she has to have, she's sexually drawn toward Demetrius, and her ego feeds, she needs, he used to care for her, and it fed her ego, and she became addicted. She's hooked on that need, and now he no longer cares for her. He cares instead for Hermia, and, that's like, again, it's like taking away an addict's drugs. It's like the alcoholic, you remove the alcohol, and the alcoholic is going to panic and do whatever he needs to do to get that bottle of booze. It's really tragic if you think about it. Her ego has been destroyed. First it's been puffed up because Demetrius has found her desirable, and that's one of the chief reasons why she finds him desirable. Remember this ego. These egos seeing each other and longing and needing each other and needing the other to need them, that's a part of the game here, part of the ritual, part of the dance of egos. Oh, there's a good title for your essay. I like that idea. But Lysander imagines that he sees into that nature is such a magnificent artist that she's revealed Helena's character, her inner beauty. And we've seen that, of course, for Shakespeare and what this play is saying, Helen has not been behaving rationally. And because she's not thinking rationally, she's not thinking logically, she's placed herself in harm's way, and she's placed others around her, in harm's way as well. After all, when she tells Demetrius, he flees into the woods at night, and he places himself at risk. We know he and Lysander loathe one another. They are arch enemies. And then Helena pursues Demetrius into the woods. So she's not thinking rationally, and therefore she's not behaving rationally. She's causing a lot of harm, not only to herself, but she's placing others at risk. She's causing quite a bit of potential harm. And that's what we know about her character. Not something really to admire in her, is it? And then Lysander, look what he says next. Where is Demetrius? Oh, how fit a word is that vile name to perish on my sword. Now he's ready to kill. He's ready to kill Demetrius, all in the name of love. Because Lysander believes he now understands, he finds his one true love, and it wasn't Hermia. Instead, it's Helena. And so Lysander is ready to kill. Now this is interesting, isn't it? Because Lysander knows that Demetrius no longer cares for Helena. But Lysander, in his passion, he's ready to any competition that might stand in his way, that possibly might stand in his way. I would argue he's ready to steamroll right over. He's ready to take out of the game of love, and he's ready. He says, "Oh, how fit a word is that vile name to perish on my sword." And it takes Helena here to remind Lysander that he's got things wrong. "Do not say so, Lysander, say not so. What though he love your Hermia?" See, Helena's not understanding why Lysander is professing, to die, that he's willing to die for Helena, for Helena, and to kill Demetrius. She's not understanding what he's saying. She's confused. Helena believes that Lysander loves Hermia. She says, "Do not say so, Lysander, say not so. What though he love your Hermia? Lord, what though? Yet Hermia still loves you, then be content." Hermia loves you, you love Hermia, be content with Hermia. Be content that you have one another. And Lysander, look at his response. "Content with Hermia? No, I do repent the tedious minutes I with her have spent." Notice under the influence here of the flower juice here, suddenly Lysander, he finds his previous existence with Hermia. Oh, how tedious, how dull, how insipid, how uninteresting. The novelty's worn off, hasn't it? And he's now completely forgotten about Hermia, and he's only reminded of her. Only Helena has to remind Lysander of Hermia, and when he recalls Hermia, he openly rejects having ever enjoyed any time with her. The tedious minutes with her he's spent, again under the influence here. I would argue what Shakespeare's saying is, at any moment those sexual hormones can kick in. It depends on the situation you find yourself in. Again, this undermining this view that lovers will be faithful, they'll be constant. Your one true love, that you're not going to cheat, you're not going to go out, and find someone else. But Shakespeare's saying this drug, these sexual hormones, this is a powerful drug. Remember, it's much more potent than even heroin, and under its influence, when those hormones kick in, when they start hopping, when they start skipping, when they start coursing through the bloodstream, you are not going to be able to, refrain. Reason is, your desires are going to trump your ability to reason, to be rational, and to be constant and faithful to the one you professed you love. No, I do repent the tedious minutes I with her have spent. And then at the top of the next page, he continues, not with Hermia, but Helena I love. Again, we see the sudden change of heart here. His desires are now, it's Helena he prefers, not Hermia, and he's emphatic. He repeats, it isn't Hermia, it's rather you, Helena, I love. And he makes a comparison next, doesn't he? Who will not change a raven for a dove? And the metaphors here, a raven and a dove here. Hermia is the raven, of course, and Helena is the dove. And again, symbolically speaking, the raven, the raven is seen as it's a bird of ill omen. It bodes evil. Evil is just over the horizon, and I recall Edgar Allan Poe's narrative poem, famous narrative poem, "The Raven," which keeps reminding the speaker of the poem, of Poe's poem, that he's lost his love, and never again will she return. The loss is permanent. there is, of course, no happily ever after ending for the speaker of that poem. So the raven here becomes a symbol of something to despise, something to avoid. If you see a raven at your doorstep, at your window, if you hear a raven tapping at your window pane, well, you know trouble's on the way. Evil is just over the horizon here. And the dove, of course, is the symbol of beauty and devotion. And dove, devotion. We see the word devotion in the word dove. And the doves, of course, in Roman mythology, they pulled the chariot of the goddess of love, Venus. So the dove, and remember the dove is white, again, a symbol of purity and innocence and virginity. So Helena now is the dove, and Hermia is a raven, something to detest, to despise, to avoid. And then, what's interesting here, in the next line, Lysander becomes a kind of philosopher, a rather poor philosopher, but nevertheless, he wants to prove to Helena that that this just isn't, that how his behavior here, the fact that he loves Helena, he has rational reasons for why he feels this way, and he's trying to persuade and to convince her here. Look what he says: "The will of man is by his reason swayed." And of course, that's how it should be. I've made the argument that our reason, our intellectual intelligence, that's what should keep our desires, our wills, our desires in check. Keep that animal on its chain. Don't let it loose, because it can create all kinds of havoc. It can all kinds of disturbance if it's unleashed, if it's loosed. And the will of man is by his reason swayed. This is what Lysander believes. This is a fact. Man is in control of his desires because he is rational. And of course, this is what Shakespeare wishes man was able to do, to keep his will, his desires in check by using his reason. But unfortunately, that's not what Shakespeare sees happening. Certainly not here with Lysander. So there's irony in this, in these words, in what Lysander's speaking here about concerning reason and desire. The will of man is by his reason swayed, and reason says, you are the worthier made. And there again is that word worthy, worthier. You are more worth than Hermia. You, Helena, are more value, more worth than Helena. And of course, reason here is informing Lysander's brain, isn't it? He now understands the truth, the philosophical truth here. The facts, her inner beauty point to this philosophical truth that she is far worthier than Hermia is, that Helena is this individual of integrity, of character, someone to respect. Reason is telling him this. And of course, the irony here is we know that reason has nothing to do with this. Lysander is unaware, isn't he, that he's under the influence of the magical flower juice, which again, let me point out that the juice here, I say, is representative. It's not being used in a symbolic way necessarily. It's representative of the sexual hormones that are now pumping through Lysander's brain, through his bloodstream through his brain. Reason says you are the worthier made. And look what Lysander says next. Things growing, he makes an analogy here. Things growing are not ripe until their season. So I, being young till now, ripe not to reason. So things that are young, things growing, fruit, vegetables, they're growing, they're not yet ripe, they haven't matured, they haven't flowered, they're not ready for consumption. Things growing are not ripe until their season. And Lysander, formerly when he was desirous of Hermia, he then was not ripe like a piece of fruit. He had not fully understood what is of most value. Things growing are not ripe until their reason. So I, being young till now, write not to reason. But now he is the rational man. He's saying, before I was not behaving, I was not thinking clearly, I was not being lucid, I was being foolish, letting my desires, my passions, my needs overwhelm my ability to reason. And that's why I was drawn toward Hermia. She's not the woman I should respect. She's not the woman of worth, of real value. She's not the woman of character, of intellectual integrity. She's not the woman, the ethically upright woman. She's not the right choice. It's you, Helena, because I have right to reason now, and now I'm the rational man, and I can see clearly. My love for you, my desire for you is looking with my eye, seeing clearly. It's got 20/20 vision. Things growing are not ripe until their season, so I, being young, when he loved Hermia, so I, being young till now that I love you, Helen, till now, ripe not to reason. And then he sums up here at the end. And of course, the irony is very heavy throughout this passage, right? Because again, Lysander doesn't realize what has occurred. He doesn't understand that he's under the influence of this chemical concoction that's got hold. That's, as I said, it's brewing in his brain. So he says, and touching now the point of human skill, Shakespeare, interesting what he's doing, Shakespeare's doing in this passage. He's reminding us what is of most value. What does set human beings apart from the other organisms on the planet? It's not that somehow we can feel more than other organisms. In fact, you could argue, as I've said before, that animals, we don't know for certain, but animals may actually experience pain more than human beings because our brains do, need a great deal of our energy is spent on doing this higher kind of thinking, this conceptualizing. So our senses may be dulled. Animals may actually experience pain. Their pain may be even worse than the pain that we experience, we human beings. But this is what's said, not the fact that we can experience pain, because other animals can, other species can. Even the insects, I would argue, can. I mean, the insects, remember, are motivated. They're motivated to eat and drink and have sex. They're motivated to get away from that whip, to get out, climb out of that quicksand they find themselves in. But what does set human beings apart, what does make us, in that sense, special and unique, is this intelligence thing, this ability to reason, this ability to observe the facts, collect the facts, and then deduce from those facts what is of most value, these philosophical truths that inform us what is really important, of value to concerning existence, being here on this planet, being here in this universe. This is the point of human skill. And touching now the point of human skill, reason. Reason becomes the marshal to my will. Reason is now in control, is marshaling my will, has got it in check. Mr. Spock, my intelligence is in control here. Not my emotions, not my desires, not my ego, not my psychology, not my, of course, I'm saying this, but all of these things is what is meant here. not my psychology, not my ego, not my needs, my biological urges, and not my cultural indoctrinations. Not buying into what the society has told me is important. Like a woman's physical beauty, that's what's important. That's what a man needs to find. Women must be physically pleasing to the eye. Or men must somehow demonstrate that they are alpha and that they have the ability to take care of the female in a patriarchal world, that they have the money, the power, the wealth, the influence to provide the female with all that she might need, all the comforts and securities that they might be able to indulge her, to buy her the pretty bling bling. All of this, these values, this is not what Lysander says. He's not under this control. He's not being influenced by these needs, these biological urges and psychological desires and cultural brainwashings. That's not what's controlling him. It's reason. Reason becomes the marshal to my will. The beast is on the leash and leads me to your... And here's what he finds. His ability to reason. Reason becomes the marshal to my will and leads me to your eyes. And of course the eyes, you've heard the expression, the eyes are the windows to the soul. So again, this idea that he can see her soul, what is truly of most value, of most essence here. He's speaking figuratively. What is of most value in a woman or in any individual, and that's who that person is on the inside. Beauty is only skin deep. What's more important is one's inner worth, inner beauty, integrity, uprightness, being principled, understanding that a brain in pain is a brain in pain, and that your brain in pain isn't any more important than any other brain in pain. Not rationally speaking, 1 equals 1. And that knowing that you know from your own experience that a brain in pain, that's the last thing you want. And the last thing you want is to realize you've got ALS. You don't want that. A brain in pain is a terrible thing. So naturally, you wouldn't want to cause another brain to be in pain. So you've got this rational notion of 1 equals 1. My brain in pain is no different from your brain in pain, rationally speaking. That's the rational, that's what the scientific facts point to. And then the philosophical truth says, therefore, since you would not want someone to injure your brain, harm you, cause you to be in a state of want or need or torture or torment, then you certainly don't want to cause that to others. That's where, right, the philosophical truths you derive from this scientific fact. This idea, therefore, that's how you should act in the world. You need to be out there being very careful that you're behaving, that your behavior is limited, that you understand that when you get on the highway, you go the speed limit. That's what somebody's rational who does. That's what somebody who's trying, as we're going to see, bottom becomes, his head is changed into that of a jackass. That's what someone who's trying his best to be the tiniest jackass he can be. But most people are not. Most are on that highway meeting their needs only. They're enormous jackasses. Their desires are marshaling their reason. They're overlooking these fundamental, basic scientific facts and that very simple formula, 1 + 1 = 2. They can't even add 1 + 1 = 2. They just can't do it. Last night, the fireworks started going off, and I'm thinking, 1 + 1 = 2 people. I mean, do you know how many people are harmed every year by fireworks? Seriously injured, burned, some even killed, and many of them children who don't know no better. They don't know no better, and their parents say, light up the cherry bomb. The parents who ought to be able to add 1 + 1 = 2. I mean, go on to, just Google it. Just Google it today and see how many people are injured every year, some severely and some killed, and many of them children who just aren't able to figure it out. Their mamas and daddies and the culture around them is telling them fireworks is cool. You need to light up them fireworks. And even our government spends billions of dollars every year on firework displays. What a waste of resources. 1 + 1 = 2. You might say, well, what are you telling me, Mr. Starkey, that I can't light up my fireworks? No, I'm saying, look, if you're addicted, fine, okay. If you've got to have your fireworks, baby, light them up. You're an addict. You're addicted to the heroin. Some people just can't get off the drug, and that's perfectly okay. I'm an addict many, many times over. But just admit, that's all I'm asking is that people admit. Admit to yourself, I admit to myself I'm being a jackass. I need to speak up against this addiction, this firework addiction. I'm not being a hypocrite. I just say, look, I'm an addict. I got to have my fireworks. But let's not get children of the next generation hooked on fireworks. It causes harm. It causes pain. It kills. It's a terrible waste of our resources. Think of those billions of dollars our government could be spending, that households could be spending on their children's education. Instead, they're wasting it on fireworks. And the children wouldn't be addicted to fireworks if fireworks didn't exist. They wouldn't be missing fireworks if there weren't fireworks in the world. So anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent here. 1 + 1 = 2. That's just what people can't see. Shakespeare's so upset. He knows what he's up against. Reason becomes the marshal to my will. Lysander thinks he's being rational here and that his desires are in control, and we know no. Again, he's hopping. He's hopping on those hormones. Reason becomes the marshal to my will. And look at his conclusion. It leads me to your eyes. I can see your inner worth, your inner beauty. And we know that there's very little to admire in Helena. She's just a child. She's irrational. Her desires own her. They're controlling her, and they're causing her harm, and they're causing others around her. They're putting others in potential danger. And leads me to your eyes where I o'erlook. And what does he see? Love's stories written in love's richest books. He might as well be saying, I see a fairy tale. You're the princess of the fairy tale. These are the love stories that Lysander has been feeding on ever since he was a little boy. These are the Cinderella stories, the Sleeping Beauty stories, the Rapunzel, let down your hair stories, the Snow White stories. Love stories in love's richest book. The Love's Richest book is it's an anthology, a collection of all these great fairy tales, these fictions that tell Lysander that this is true love, what he's experiencing now. And this moment of awakening, Shakespeare here is undercutting this notion of the romantic view of love at first sight. And yes, that is an indication of that love is true. And that this couple is truly a couple that falls in love at first sight is truly, truly seeing in the eyes the soul of the other person and knows automatically that is someone special. That is someone who deserves not only my love, my desire, my devotion, but my respect. Let's take a break here. I'll be right back. And I am back. Both of these problems, problem 4 and problem 5, the problems we're addressing today, problem 4, this notion of this romantic view of falling in love at first sight that Shakespeare is undermining and revealing what's really going on here. It's quite disturbing. And also this 5th problem that most people fall in love, desire others for their superficial qualities or their superficial traits rather than things that really aren't, certainly in comparison with what is a really of true worth. In comparison with a person's integrity, looks aren't that important, are they? In comparison with a person's character, ethical decency, whether or not someone is rich and powerful, really isn't that important, is it? So this idea, this 4th problem, this idea of falling in love at first sight, that it's impossible when falling in love at first sight to really have an understanding of what it isn't some sort of mysterious moment that's occurring here and that is somehow designed, and whether it's part of the universe itself plan or part of the God's plan, part of some supernatural being's purpose or design, falling in love at first sight. There's nothing mystical or magical going on here. Instead, it's really quite disturbing, quite disheartening what's happening. It's just the sex, the drive, and it's just the ego, that psychological need. And it's just how someone's been raised, Someone's been raised on the fireworks. They've got to have the fireworks or their 4th of July is a disaster. Better to have fired the firework. Better to have shot the firework into the air and to have that firework fizzle and fade than never to have shot the firework into the air at all. I mean, some people just, their 4th of July is absolutely ruined if they can't shoot off the fireworks, and most of those people are children. But it's the same with love. Better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Better to have had a fantastic 4th of July and now be sad and devastated that it's past and can never return than never to have had that 4th of July at all. And you can see how it's merely a projected value, because I personally detest fireworks, and so do most of the doggies on my street, because they go into a panic when they hear the busy folks, the meddling folks out there shooting off these fireworks. But at any rate, I'll get off the topic of fireworks. So, and then the second problem, problem 5 that I've introduced today that you can explore in the play, this idea that we do fall in love with the superficial elements of someone's person, and that too is a tragedy. It just is. And some people, when they wake up to the fact, by then it's too late, it's over. You just realize, you wake up one morning and roll over in bed and you realize, oh my intelligence, I married a jackass. I married this person because I thought she was pretty. Or I married this person because I thought he was handsome. Or he made me laugh. Or he made me feel good about myself. Or we had the same interests in common. We both loved to shoot off fireworks on the 4th of July. And now I've rolled over and I realize I've become rational. I realize I'm married to an enormous jackass it's all about his needs and his ego and his desires. And he's so deeply brainwashed by his culture that he doesn't see all the harm he's causing in the world. And if you point it out to him, he'd get angry with you rather than say, hey, I'm addicted, okay? Get off my back. All right, fine, you're addicted. We're all addicted. But you got to admit the addiction and not pass it on. So I'm going to point out another illustration here. The magical flower juice is center stage here. Again, remember, if you're a romantic sitting in the audience, the magical flower juice is all about the mystery of falling in love. It's fairies operating behind the scenes here. They're invisible, you can't see them. Or it's the gods, it's Cupid. His bow and arrow shot you in the heart. That's right, it's magic. After all, remember the magical flower has been, the flower was accidentally hit by Cupid's arrow. He was aiming at a woman who was a virgin, perhaps an allusion to Queen Elizabeth I. Shakespeare might be having fun, this idea of virginity. Shakespeare knows, for Elizabeth I, how important it was for her not to marry and lose all that power, all that control. But the flower, accidentally, Cupid, blindfolded, of course, shoots his flower and with the golden arrow, with the, whatever it is that penetrates the heart and makes one fall in love at first sight with the first person, he sees. So the little flower was hit accidentally by Cupid's arrow. The gods are operating behind the scene. In this case, the gods don't know what they're doing. And certainly Puck doesn't know what he's doing. He's placing the juice on the wrong eyes here. This certainly isn't some sort of intelligent design operating, is it? This is all mayhem and madness and confusion. It's all people's desires and needs and wants rising to the surface and drowning, just flooding, just drowning. The dam is busted, and all those desires come pouring forth, and reason is just drowned to death in this flood, this flood of irrationality and desire. So here we have it again. The little flower hit by Cupid's arrow now is, of course, swollen with the juice, the magical potion or whatever it was on the tip of Cupid's arrow. And here it takes center stage again with Demetrius. I'm now on page 1367. I'm actually in Act 3. We're in Act 3, Scene 2, page 1367. At the bottom of the page, line 137. Act 3, Scene 2, page 1367 in your anthologies, line 137. And of course, by this time, Demetrius is the second to fall victim to Puck's mischief. And this time, of course, Puck places the juice on Demetrius's eyelids while Demetrius is asleep. And when Demetrius awakens, he finds Helena and Lysander nearby. And, Lysander now is in pursuit of Helena. And Helena is fleeing from Lysander. Remember earlier, Demetrius was fleeing from Helena, and Helena was pursuing Demetrius. And now Helena and Lysander stumble upon Demetrius, and when Demetrius awakens under the influence, look what he cries out. Now, if Lysander, upon awakening, becomes a philosopher, a rather poor philosopher, I'm arguing. I mean, he does understand the importance of reason, but his conclusion, the conclusion that he draws, that he sees in Helena's eyes, love's stories written in love's richest books, that, he's buying into the fairy tales. That's what reason tells him, that he's found his one true love, and because, of her inner beauty, and the fairy tale has come true. And the happily ever after is just on the horizon for Lysander and this is what he concludes. So he's a rather poor philosopher. Of course, he is unaware of what's occurred, just as Demetrius is. And look at Demetrius. If Lysander awakens a philosopher, Demetrius awakens a poet. And again, a rather bad poet. Notice all the conventional images and metaphors and similes that Demetrius uses in this passage. I'm sure you've heard of many of them before. And Demetrius cries out when he sees Helena upon awakening, "Oh, Helen, goddess, nymph, perfect, divine." Notice here the nouns, the adjectives here that keep piling one on top of the other. I mean, Demetrius just can't find the words to describe, what he sees in Helena now. And just moments before he went to sleep, he wanted nothing to do with Helena. Is this really falling in love at first sight? Now here's Shakespeare. He's trying again. He's slowly but surely, Shakespeare, of course, is slowly but surely telling us the truth. With Lysander, of course, Lysander, suddenly we could imagine he recognizes Helena's worth. But here we know how Demetrius, just moments prior to his going to sleep, Demetrius, was in love with, detested Helena, was desperate to get away from her. But here, look what he says, "Oh, Helen, goddess, nymph, perfect, divine." She's a goddess. Again, the emphasis on her beauty. She's a nymph. She's perfection. She's a divinity. She's divine. He's placing her up on this pedestal and worshiping her. He's just a poor, fancy follower worshiping this goddess of beauty here. She's the new Venus, who's risen from the sea. And here, in his eyes, she is perfection. And that's a pretty tough pedestal to put a woman on, for her to, that's one of the problems, isn't it? This emphasis on a woman's looks, on her beauty. That in our society, that's, for many women, that's their chief power, and it ain't going to last. Nothing lasts in this world. And the desperation some women will go to maintain their looks and their beauty and maintain that power in this patriarchal order they have is one way that many of them, for some of them, it's the only means toward having a little bit of power, a little bit of influence in the world, unfortunately. And yes, they will go to great lengths, to great extent. I mean, some are addicted to plastic surgery, and others won't go out of the house without first, putting on all the paraphernalia, all the perfume. And here, Demetrius is drawn to her physical appearance. And again, this is Shakespeare's telling us now, only now he's telling us more directly. You can always imagine that Lysander had a change of heart, and suddenly he realized that it wasn't Hermia who was of value, but of real worth, but rather Helena. It's a little tougher to imagine Demetrius, who not only used to love Helena, but then tires of her and rejects her, and then he suddenly head over heels for Hermia, and now once again we find him head over heels for Helena. Of course, yes, he's gone through many more changes here, so yeah, it's a little bit more difficult to imagine, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe I need to reassess that idea, because remember, Cupid does have wings. He is flighty and irrational, and we recall Theseus too, don't we? Theseus, the love him and leave him kind of guy. And so love is fickle, Shakespeare may be saying. Yeah, Shakespeare's definitely saying is love isn't constant. It isn't fickle. Again, it depends on the moment, the situation. when those hormones kick in, watch out, because they can control you. How difficult it is then to halt those horses that are running wild, and the wagon's out of control. You're headed for the cliff there. So yeah, Cupid is flighty. He is a winged god, and he, So sure, I can see this now. To what, my love, shall I compare thine eyne? So now he's going to make these conventional comparisons. And again, the emphasis is on her beauty. Again, we see the problem. Once more, problem 4, this falling in love at first sight. This is suspect. This is no mystery. This ain't no mystery. And then we see this idea of this superficial appearance, these superficial aspects, qualities that people are drawn to for various reasons, as we've mentioned. To what, my love, shall I compare thine eyne? That's the poetic word for eye. Crystal is muddy. Oh, how ripe and show thy lips, those kissing cherries, tempting grow. So if he tries to compare Helena's eyes to crystal, sparkling crystal that draws our eyes, that glistens and glitters in the sunlight. Well, crystal is muddy compared to Helena's eyes. Her eyes are brighter and more sparkly and more glistening and glimmering than the loveliest crystal lit by the sun. Crystal is muddy. And then he turns to her lips. Oh, how ripe and show thy lips, those kissing cherries tempting grow. He sees her lips and they grow in importance before his eyes like cherries ripening. And how tempting they're becoming. You see that delicious cherry on the vine as it ripens and it grows, and you're focused and you zero in and you see, you desire, you want, and her lips are the colors of these cherries, and he imagines the sweetness, the taste of her lips. It would be like, they'd be like eating a juicy, delectable, big cherry here. Thy lips, those kissing cherries, tempting grow. And of course we know, your lips are like cherries. We've heard these kinds of metaphors and similes before, so they're rather stale, they're cliche. And Shakespeare's having fun here. First of all, of course, as most critics note, he's having fun. He's mocking, the kind of poet, the kind of sonneteer who resorts to these kinds of descriptions and professing his desire, his love, his one true love for the object, the lady of his desire. But Shakespeare is also using these cliches to show that this love, this feeling, this emotion ain't nothing special. You're not unique, feeling something mysterious and magical, that others have felt this same way before. And, that's one of the reasons why we have two couples in this play rather than one. In Romeo and Juliet, you have one couple because, and it's, their story ends tragically because the emphasis is on that what Romeo and Juliet have discovered is special and unique. And everyone refers to, their potential their heart's desire as a Romeo or a Juliet, to some lesser extent as Juliet. But Romeo, the ideal image, the dream lover, because the Romeo is unique and the Juliet, this couple was unique and special. There was only one of them, after all, in the play. But here, of course, we have a doubling. We have two couples. We have Helena and Demetrius and Hermia and Lysander, which really underscores this idea. I mean, one critic points out this adds to the humor. Yes, it certainly does. It adds to the confusion and the chaos, but it points out all these problems that we've been discussing. The competition between the young men and the young women for each other's love, and this falling in and out of love, and all these problems we have been addressing. but most importantly, it underscores the idea that this romantic view as love is something mystical and magical. No, it's quite ordinary. It's happening every day. And the explanation is scientific. It's a mechanical process. The hormones are going to kick in, and that's when it's going to happen. And under the influence of the hormones, a purely mechanical process, people are going to imagine somehow that they are unique and experiencing something wondrous. But no, that's not what Shakespeare's saying here, is he? I'm going to take a break for just a minute, and I'll be right back. And I am back. Sorry to keep interrupting these awkward moments while we're interpreting the play, but teaching from home, I find I'm constantly distracted. I have these other obligations that I need to meet. But anyway, returning to Demetrius and his being under the influence of the magical flower juice, he says next, that pure congealed white high tar snow, fanned with the eastern wind, turns to a crow when thou holdst up thy hand. So here he's comparing the loveliness of her skin, the whiteness of her skin, again suggesting her purity, her innocence. And he makes the comparison with snow, the snow from atop Taurus, the mountain of Taurus, which, according to your footnote here, is the highest mountain range in Asia Minor, in Turkey. So yes, I mean, the hyperbole, the exaggeration. Again, I think Shakespeare, in using these cliches, these hyperbolic cliches, Shakespeare's pointing out just the irrationality of, Helena certainly is not this idealized goddess on the pedestal that Demetrius is seeing. Demetrius is desiring her. He, like Lysander, is those chemicals in his brain. The chemicals are in control. And also, I was just thinking that while I was busy doing the laundry just a moment ago, I was thinking that these conventional, these trite and stale cliches that we find in Shakespeare's day, many people were writing, many young men were writing sonnets to their true loves, and Shakespeare is suggesting that these stale, these flat, these insipid cliches are representative, if you will, of this idea of being attracted to the superficial, what's the trivialities, the superficial aspects of a person. Particularly when it comes to beauty and a woman's beauty, how truly unimportant that is in comparison to what really matters, what really is important. So anyway, he says next at the bottom of the page, "Oh, let me kiss this princess of pure white, this seal of bliss." So with his kiss, he's pledging his eternal devotion, his eternal true love, and of course we have to suspect certainly his words here. We know he loved her before, and at one moment and the next, his attentions were turned elsewhere toward Hermia. But she is her skin is like her skin is a princess of pure white. The image here, the metaphor, the princess of pure white. again, the exaggeration and the ridiculousness, the foolishness of his belief, what he believes he's experiencing here. That his sexual desires, no, that's not what he is, what he's actually experiencing, but rather he's under this, under the spell, under the charm of this great romantic love. So here we have two examples, and both, I believe, are illustrative of these problems we've been discussing. The fourth problem that I've introduced today, which is, again, this idea of falling in love at first sight, which is being ironized and it's being mocked, it's being ridiculed. Shakespeare's poking fun at it, and he's doing that through the magical flower juice. He's asking us to think a minute. No, there's no such thing as magical flower juice. The magical flower juice is literally representing, can you say that? Yes, it's representing literally the hormones, the sexual hormones that are on the loose. But of course, the most, the best illustration of this, of the magical flower juice and its power, is when it's used on Titania, when she awakens and hears Bottom singing, and Bottom is the first thing, I guess you would say, that she sees, and at that moment falls just helplessly in love with Bottom. So let's turn to that moment. And to do that, I'm afraid we've got to turn back to, Act 2. Oh no, we're still in Act 3. Oh good. I'm glad we don't have to go back. We turn to Act 3, Scene 1, and I'm on page 1362, Act 3, Scene 1. At the top of the page, line 107. Of course, recall that Puck has changed Bottom's head into the head of a jackass. And certainly Shakespeare is using the head of the jackass, Bottom's head as the head of the jackass as a metaphor for the ego. And we know that Bottom's ego is out of control. He has an enormous ego, which indicates his fear, his anxiety that he isn't important, he isn't significant, and he has to impress all those around him. He has to feel important, he has to believe he is significant, and he has to be the center of attention. Remember back in Act 1, I guess we are going back a little bit, but back in Act 1, his very first lines, he's already directing the play that he and his fellow workmen wish to put on for Theseus and Hippolyta on the couple's wedding day. And he's already telling Quince, who is directing the play, he's already giving Quince orders and telling Quince what the best way to proceed is. And remember, too, that Bottom wants to play both. He wants to play a really juicy role, and the two juiciest roles in Bottom's mind are that of the lover and the tyrant. That would make an interesting essay, Lovers and Tyrants, because I think Shakespeare's showing that love is a kind of tyranny. It is tyrannical. It takes what it wants, and it feeds what it needs, and at the expense of others around one. So anyway, Bottom does, Puck has played a prank on Bottom, because Puck recognizes of all the workmen, they're out in the woods practicing the play, of all these workmen, all these working men, that Bottom is the one to play the prank on, because Bottom is the biggest jackass in the group. He's the one with this ego that is out of control. So Bottom, he doesn't understand. I think it's important to realize, and I think some critics get this wrong, and I think in doing so, when they misinterpret Bottom, they believe Bottom realizes that his head has been changed into that of a jackass. And no, I mean, if Bottom were to realize it, the humor in the play, in the passages that we find Bottom and Titania, we find Titania wooing Bottom, I think the humor would be lost. And more importantly, I think it would underscore this idea that the ego many times is simply unaware of what a jackass, someone with an enormous ego is simply unaware of what a huge jackass he is. And that's the whole point here in the scene, that people with these egos, these tyrants, these lovers, they behave like big jackasses. And that causes a lot of pain for those around them. And so Bottom doesn't realize what has occurred. He believes that all of his friends have run away because they're playing a prank on him. But they, of course, are horrified at what they see, that their friend is now half human, half jackass. Bottom, of course, he's not all jackass. He does have his moments in the play, doesn't he? But Bottom believes that he's the butt of their jokes, that they're playing some sort of prank by running away, and Bottom is deserted. He's all alone in the woods now by himself. I was thinking also, maybe I mentioned this in another lecture, but we don't see our heads, do we, as we walk around every day. It's as if we're walking around headless, because, I can see a little bit of my nose, but otherwise, I don't see my head unless I'm looking at in the mirror, or I'm looking at the video camera here, which has me terribly self-conscious. But again, I think that underscores the fact. So we do walk around, in this sort of headless state, don't we? But I think, again, that does underscore this unawareness of just, the jackasses we can be, because we all have this potential. The first thing I do when I look in the mirror in the morning is to remind myself, try your best today not to be a big jackass, because I know it's just, if the opportunity arises, my ego is going to be competitive, and I'm going to want, to satisfy whatever my psychology desires. So yeah, you have to remind yourself each morning. That should be the first thing I would, here's a bit of teacherly advice. I would say, yes, every morning look in the mirror, and the first thing you say before you go out in the world today, try to be as little a jackass as you can be, because there are other feeling organisms all around you, and you don't want to ruin their day. That just ain't good. So poor Bottom, he's left all alone. And Bottom, he puts on a front again. He has to see himself as a winner. So he says, look what he says at line 107. I see their knavery. This is to make an ass of me. And again, the joke is lost. The pun is lost if Bottom realizes he has the head of a jackass. So I think one of the reasons that Shakespeare turns Bottom's head, another reason he turns Bottom's head into that of a jackass. This would make a good essay, wouldn't it? You could explore the several reasons why. I've mentioned several already. Why Bottom's head is changed into that of a jackass. But one reason, of course, is that Shakespeare likes a pun. Puns are usually seen as the lowest form of literary devices, but I like them too, I have to admit. And by turning Bottom's head into a jackass, Shakespeare can use the word ass. And we all know the connotation, what that word suggests. So Shakespeare's having fun here. I see their knavery. This is to make an ass of me, to fright me, if they could. But they can't, not Bottom. He's in control. But I will not stir from this place. Do what they can. I will walk up and down here, and I will sing that they shall hear I am not afraid. And of course, the very fact that he's going to sing reveals that he's petrified. He's shaking in his working boots. Because that's what we do when we're alone and in the dark and in the woods. We begin to whistle a tune whenever we feel afraid. We begin to hum or even sing, so that we can distract ourselves from our anxieties, not knowing what might, be lurking there in the bush. Is it a bear? The bear in the bush. But I will not stir from this place, do what they can. I will walk up and down here, and I will sing that they shall hear I am not afraid. And he begins to sing. Now, what's interesting about his song is the theme of the song is how husbands are made foolish by their wives, because their wives often, they play around on their husbands, they cheat on their husbands. And in Shakespeare's day, in a patriarchal world, in ancient Athens as well, in any patriarchal society, the idea, men can cheat, of course. They're special. They're superior. But women cheating on men, oh no. And again, it goes back to this fear, this anxiety, again, particularly in Shakespeare's time when they did not have paternity tests, the idea that you don't know whose baby your a wife, your one true love is carrying. The problem of knowing the other mind, this is the problem of knowing the other man. Is there another man who's, cuckolded you? And the idea of a cuckold comes from the cuckoo bird. And we know in nature that the cuckoo, he fools the other birds. I mean, he's a real cheat, the cuckoo bird. She lays her eggs, again a female, she lays her eggs in the nest of another bird. And that way, she don't have to raise the babies. She doesn't have to raise the chickens, the little chicks, the baby chicks, does she? Some other bird's going to do all the work. So she's going to fool some other bird. And so the idea that the baby that a wife has is some other man's child, and the man is going to be made the fool in this case because he's going to do all the work. Well, I guess the male bird too, who built the nest and has to feed, perhaps, I don't know enough about cuckoos, but maybe both the male and the female feed the babies and raise the baby. I don't know. But at any rate, in human beings, a man doesn't want to be fooled into raising a man's child. So you don't want to be cuckolded. You don't want to be made a fool of by some other man and by your wife, by her fooling around on the side and, ultimately becoming pregnant by another man, and then you can't know for certain whose baby it is. So that's the idea, and this is the song that Bottom sings. And why is Shakespeare doing this? Well, I think it might be Shakespeare's way of revenging himself on Oberon, because Oberon really is being an enormous jackass, isn't he? Risking Titania's well-being by sprinkling the magical flower juice onto her eyelids and desiring that she wake when some vile thing is near. And here, this idea that Titania shall fall in love, the moment of an awakening, the hormones now, her brain is seething with hormones at this point. She, where will this lead? Will it lead perhaps to Bottom and Titania engaging in sex, having sex? I noticed on my other my previous videos that often I use the word make love instead of having sex, and that's the romantic upbringing in me. We were taught not to, I was raised in the South, decades ago, and you didn't speak the word sex, so you never said someone was having sex or engaging in sex. Now I think I'd like to say the word, but no, it was always making love, and that's a romantic view of the sexual act, isn't it? It suggests more. It's more than just a physical union. It's more importantly, it's about this making love, coming together, and spiritually, and again, the soulmate, that idea here for the romantic. But yes, you can see my upbringing at times. So Bottom begins to sing, and he begins singing where? At line 130, eyes. At line 115, 110. Yes, he sings, line 110, he sings, the ouzel cock so black of hue, with orange tawny bill, the throstle with his notes so true, the wren with little quill. You can hear the braying in his voice, right? And this awakens Titania from her peaceful slumber, and look at her words upon awaking. Again, she's under the influence of the magical flower juice, and she cries out, "What angel wakes me from my flowery bed?" I don't know why, but whenever I perform Titania, my thick southern accent comes out. What angel wakes me from my flowery bed? And notice, she hears the voice of an angel. And this, of course, is quite funny, because Bottom can't sing. Bottom really can't do much right, although, you can see that he is a man who, he likes to find problems so that he can find solutions to those problems. And he likes to introduce those problems, remember, to the actors in that first scene, and in this scene here, Act 3, Scene 1, so that he can be the hero who saves the day. He's got the answer to the problem. He's already decided, he's already thought of the problems ahead of time, and he's already resolved the problems. So, but no, Bottom, he's not particularly talented as a singer or an actor. He's a ham. And he wants to play all the roles, particularly the roles of the tyrant or the lover, because the tyrant and the lover, they're the ones who emote and are quite dramatic and carried away by their emotions and their desires and wants and so forth. What angel? So she hears the voice of an angel, so we're alerted already that, okay, we know now that she's under the influence not of something magical. This idea of true love and the meeting of soulmates at first sight, and they're being attracted again to what really matters rather than the superficial. She's attracted to the voice, and the voice, of course, is just horrific. It grates on the ears like nails on a chalkboard. Oh, sorry. But she hears the voice of an angel. And so Shakespeare, to bring this point home, he has Bottom continue to sing, "The finch, the sparrow, and the lark, the plain-song cuckoo gray, whose note full many a man doth mark, and dares not answer nay." And again, Shakespeare punning on the word nay, the mule neighing, the jackass neighing, and the word no here. And Bottom says, "For indeed, who would set his wit to so foolish a bird? Who would give a bird the lie, though he cry cuckoo never so?" So, I mean, who's going to argue with a bird who cries out and says, "You've been cuckolded. Your wife's been cheating on you"? Who would even bother arguing with a bird who would accuse a bird of lying? So this joke here, again, it reminds us, and we know that Oberon, in the next scene to come, and you've read the play already once through, so we know that Oberon will watch Titania and Bottom when they are alone together in her bower. So this idea of will Oberon be cuckolded or not? Will Titania actually have sex with Bottom? Shakespeare is alerting us to this possibility. He's teasing us, isn't he? The suspense to follow. Then Titania cries out after this. She says, I pray thee, gentle mortal, sing again. So is mine eye enthralled to thy shape. So she's just so terribly attracted by, again, his physical beauty. He's got the head of a jackass, and this is what she finds. She can't. She's just drawn to him. She's helpless before this paragon of animals, if you will. My ear is much enamored of thy note. So his voice, as she's fallen in love with his voice. So is mine eye enthralled to thy shape, and of course, his physical beauty. And then look what she says. This is fascinating. And thy fair virtue's force perforce doth move me, on the first view to say, to swear, I love thee. So what is she saying here? She's saying it's your virtue. It's your character. You're a jackass of integrity. And it's because of that I am forced. I have no other course. Reason directs me. Only someone rational. Rational people are attracted to people of integrity, of virtue, of character. And so she's helpless because it's her reason, her ability to reason, that she realizes that that Bottom is a man of virtue, or jackass of virtue. And she realizes this on the first view, at first sight. The moment I saw you, I realized that you were a jackass of virtue. And again, here we have this idea, the idea that it isn't that at all. It can't be that at first sight. The tragedy. It's ironic, it's funny, but it's also tragic, isn't it? That's not what we desire. That's not what we're drawn to. We're drawn to the voice. We're drawn to the physical, the exterior, the surface beauty. And here we have it. She's ready to swear that she loves him because of his virtue. And again, Shakespeare, he's really, this is, again, a dark moment in the play, isn't it? He's really pointing out the irony here in the romantic viewpoint. People who fall in love, many will tell you they fall in love at first sight, and they fell in love with someone because of their, essentially what they're saying is because they're special and important. They're virtuous. They're good people. They're good people. Wise, rational, sensible, good, ethical people. And Shakespeare's saying, no, that's not it at all. And look what Bottom says. Bottom actually tells her that's not what's happening at all. Methinks, mistress, you should have little reason for that. You should have little reason to swear when you first meet me that suddenly you've fallen in love with me because of my character, my virtue. I mean, even Bottom, with his enormous ego, he's able to add 1 + 1. He realizes. that this is not the truth here of why Titania is drawn, is attracted toward him, why she desires him, why she professes immediately that she loves him at first sight. Methinks, mistress, you should have little reason for that. And there's that word again, reason. Circle that word, highlight it, because this is a play about reason versus desire. And desire wins in the end, not reason. The game of love is a game of desire. It's not a game of reason. If it were a game of reason, no rational person would play it. This is how it's going to end, the game of love, for everybody. That's what the facts say. The end is going to be sometimes catastrophic, but it's going to be tragic. It's going to end in death. It's going to end in war, death, sickness, loss. The ending isn't going to be happy. It's going to be painful. And that's just the reality. That's the world we're in. Bottom, he says, methinks, mistress, you should have little reason for that. It's Shakespeare's way right here. There's the nail in the coffin of love. Let's bury it and put it to rest. Let it lie, let it rest in peace. But let's not resurrect it. But that's what we keep doing. We keep resurrecting, right? This emotion, this game. Everybody wants to keep playing it. And we keep teaching, right, the next generation, this is the game. I mean, next to the game of economics, this game, I mean, even if you're a billionaire, you can't be happy if you don't have somebody who loves you to share that $1 billion with you. Right, okay. But anyway, and look what Bottom says next. And to me, these lines are it's just the heart of this play. It really is, these lines here. So I'll repeat, methinks, mistress, you should have little reason for that. And yet, to say the truth, reason and love keep little company together nowadays. So he's imagining reason and love, as two people. And they don't keep company nowadays. The irony of nowadays, it's always reason and love. These two individuals, they just don't get along. They keep very little company. They don't enjoy each other's company, reason and love. And what does Bottom say next? He says, the more the pity that some honest neighbors will not make them friends. Some honest neighbors will not make them friends. And I would argue that Shakespeare himself is trying his best to be the honest neighbor in this play. He's knocking on your door. He's knocking on the door of the romantic. And he's saying, look, I've got to be honest with you. Take this advice. I want to be your friend. I want to be your honest friend here. You want me to tell you the truth, don't you? Reason and love keep little company nowadays. You need to find some way to become friends. Can you find some way to come together? Can reason and love come together and ultimately become friends? And the tragedy is Shakespeare is not going to be able to find a way. He's going to have to use the supernatural to find a way. He's going to have to create these fictitious beings, these fairies, and these magical potions and magical consecrated field dews, and he's going to have to use his imagination, and he's going to have to dip into the supernatural world with his pen in order to resolve this problem that reason and love can't be made friends. They just can't. Anybody rational would realize that the game of love is a game of need, of want and desire, and it just gets out of control and does a lot of damage. And what is her response? She says, thou art as wise as thou art beautiful. But, here, you could think, Bottom is he's managed here to hit upon a truth. And it's interesting how Bottom is the one to discover the truth here concerning reason and love, isn't it? But I would argue that it's because Bottom likes an argument. He wants to win the argument. That's his ego. He wants, in anything someone says, he has to say, no, you're wrong. This is how it is. You should do it my way. It's my way or the highway. I've got the answer. I've got the solution. Listen to me. I'm the star of the play. I get to play all the roles. It's all about me. And so when Titania professes that, oh my goodness, it's your virtue that I've fallen in love with. That's why I've fallen in love at first sight. I mean, reason tells me I have no other choice. 1 + 1 = 2. I can't see otherwise. I mean, we can't rationalize our way that out of 1 + 1 = 2. We just can't. And what does Bottom say? Bottom wants to say, nay, nay. Is his ego coming forward? And some critics will argue that Bottom is like the child who speaks, out of the mouth of babes comes, wisdom and that sort of. No, I mean, Bottom certainly is a babe in the woods here. I don't think, I would imagine he's a virgin. The importance of all these women being virgins in the play, and here we actually, I imagine the young girls are virgins too. But Bottom strikes me as a virgin. He doesn't have any experience when it comes to this game of love. And yet, his ego, his desire to make a counter-argument, a counter-attack so that he can come out on top, it just happens to be that he hits upon a truth here when he does. There's the irony. His being a jackass, his neighing, his wanting to neigh. And he hits upon the truth here. It's interesting. Some people just don't like to argue. And, it upsets them and they worry and fret when people get in an argument. And I'm not one of those people when it comes to, arguing these controversial issues, because I think what Shakespeare wants us to understand is that it's the truth that should be our God. It's the truth we all want to come to an understanding, this wisdom that we all want to arrive at. We've got to have this accurate model of the reality around us, as accurate as possible, because we can't have an accurate, a perfect description of the world around us, because we've got this synthetic model here in our brain that's doing the modeling, and they're two different, they're separate and distinct, these two worlds. But it's arriving at the truth, this philosophical wisdom. It's putting these facts together and arriving at these most important values. Then everyone wins. Everyone becomes the alpha thinker then. If you were a beta thinker before and you did not have the truth, and somebody points out the truth and you lose the argument, you make a counter argument and yet you lose, well, you don't lose. Whether it's you who loses the argument or I'm the one who loses the argument. If the argument is sound, if it's based on reason and it's true, it's correct, we're all winners. We're all alpha thinkers when it comes to this particular issue. So you just can't lose when you arrive at the truth. But so many people, their egos again get in the way. They want to be the one who has the truth. Regardless of whether they have the truth or not, they want to come out the winner in the argument. And a lot of people, I don't have any friends anymore because I go out and make arguments. I've gained a lot of experience from reading Shakespeare, obviously. I've learned quite a bit. And I go out and make some of these arguments, and these people get upset with me rather than focusing on the argument. So, I'm sort of friendless at this point. Reason and love keep little company nowadays. But at any rate, I'm contented with my own company. But anyway, reason should be like, I don't know, I was thinking the other day, reason should be like this thing we put on, this beautiful statue, this beautiful goddess we put on the pedestal. That should be what we're worshiping. And we don't want to let anything chip away at the truth, at these most important values we discover. We don't want anything. We don't want to begin to worship false gods, desires, needs, or wants. Nothing should chip away. Nothing should cause our statue to crack and to drop it away in ruins. No, you've got to protect that truth, that wisdom you've acquired. You've got to speak out. You've got to spread, right? You want more people, more artists in the world speaking these truths. So we move and we become more and more limited by how we can behave. We become littler and littler and littler jackasses. But Bottom here, because of his ego, the irony is he wants to win an argument, and he just so happens to win this argument because, he goes into the argument because he just has to prove, he's the head jackass here. He's the head, Nobody can bray louder than Bottom. But he just happens, to light upon the truth here when he makes this counter argument. And that's why these words come out of Bottom's mouth. The irony, they come out of this man who is, as I said, he is practically ego personified. And see, for example, when Titania says, "Thou art as wise as thou art beautiful," and he says, "Not so neither." He just has to win the argument. "But if I had wit enough to get out of this wood, I have enough to serve mine own turn." And he's also, he's also saying, here Titania's placing the importance on wisdom, and Bottom again, he just wants to naysay that idea. He says, "No, all I need is practical knowledge here to get out of this wood. It's not, your belief that philosophy somehow it's important that we sit around and philosophize so that we can find these most important truths. No, you're mistaken. I just want to get out of the wood. I'm a practical man." So he's always constantly being the naysayer here, telling others, you've got it wrong. Listen to me. But when he says he wants to get out of the woods, look at Titania, again, under the influence, and Shakespeare once more is pointing out these problems of our desires, particularly here with Titania. You can see, more than even with the two young men, you can see her sexual appetite awakening here. Listen what she says here, under the influence of this juice. "Out of this wood do not desire to go." She begins to breathe heavily here, I would imagine. This is how I would play it. "Out of this wood do not desire to go. Thou shalt remain here, whether thou wilt or no." She's taking charge. She's going to use her fairy force. Might makes right. Under the influence of desire, of love. This is getting frightening, isn't it? She's not going to permit Bottom to leave. He wants to get out of the woods. She says, "I don't care whether you want to get out of these woods or not, you're staying here. You ain't going nowhere." And look what she says. "I am a spirit of no common rate." Watch out, buddy. I'm not some ordinary fairy. "I'm a spirit of no common rate. The summer still doth tend upon my state." I'm in control of the seasons, the summer, and it's the summer, baby, and we know what summer means. So she says, "I'm a powerful fairy. I'm the queen of the fairies, and I regulate the seasons, and this is summer. And in summer, this is what we're going to do." And again, a Midsummer Night's Dream, summer is the season of heat, of passion, of desire. I remember this song back in my youth when I used to go to the nightclubs, and everybody was, I forget what that, the John Travolta film where everybody's, what was that called, that kind of dancing? But at any rate, there was a song that played all the time in the clubs. It's getting hot in here, so take off all your clothes. It's the idea, no, it's not, it's getting hot, so take your clothes off because you want to be cool. No, it's getting hot, take off your clothes, because hot here, heat, means we're all sexually aroused. And that's what happens in the bars. They turn the lights down low, anything can happen in the dark, then they get you liquored up, then you're definitely not going to be a person of reason. And of course, all kinds of tragedies can follow. You wake up the next day in bed next to a jackass, and then a few days later you realize you've got a little itch in some place that is embarrassing. And you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, oh my, you've got a problem. You've got an itch there, and it ain't going away. And sometimes they tell you, the doctors will tell you, and that's going to kill you. So yeah, I mean, the fun, the passion, the excitement, the sexual heat, I mean, it can, in momentary as a sound, brief as the lightning in the collied night, it can suddenly, the jaws of darkness can devour it up. But at any rate, I need to stay focused here. The summer still doth tend upon my state, and I do love thee. And again, that word love. How could you possibly love this, this idea of true love, this romantic notion? True love. You, I can see how special, how unique, how virtuous, jackass you are. I do love thee. Therefore, go with me. Notice she commands him. She orders him. She doesn't say, please. She doesn't say, please, mother, may I? No, she says, therefore, go with me. And then she begins to bribe him. You can see her brain is scheming. This is not an intellectual intelligence that's at work here. This is a brain that's scheming for her own personal satisfactions, her own personal gain. You can see her sexual ambition here. I'll give thee fairies to attend on thee. I'll give you fairies. I'll make you the center of all. This has got to appeal to Bottom. This has got to be persuasive. This ego of Bottom's to be attended on, to finally get what he thinks he deserves. This ego of his, he's going to be in the spotlight. I'll give thee fairies to attend on thee. Imagine if you had little magical creatures attending on you, meeting your every needs. And they shall fetch thee jewels from the deep. His every needs, these jewels from the deep. These jewels from the deep, suggesting that these are the kinds of needs that are difficult for mortals to meet. You've got to go down into the deep where it's dark and dangerous in the ocean. Risky to find these buried treasures, and most humans aren't able. They aren't able to have their deepest desires met, the jewels from the deep. And they shall fetch thee jewels from the deep, and sing while thou on pressed flowers dost sleep. She's already imagining the pressed flowers. She's going to take him back to her bower, isn't she? And of course, he's going to have all of his needs met. And then look what she says. Here's what's really on her mind. My favorite lines in the poem, in the play. Well, no, I mean, I just have so many favorite lines, but look what she says here. And I will purge thy mortal grossness so that thou shalt like an airy spirit go. I shall purge thy mortal grossness so that thou shalt like an airy spirit go. Yeah, Yeah, I mean, we don't realize it, but our mortal grossness weighs us down. I mean, you're not aware of it, but right now, gravity is weighing you down. Stop and recognize it for a moment. You can feel it in your feet. You feel the floor pressing up on your feet, and your feet pressing down on the floor. Now, you've got more energy bits pressing from above. That's what's keeping your feet on the floor. You've got fewer energy bits pressing up through the earth, because many of them are being trapped inside the earth. So you've got more, and the gravity is pushing you down. And you can feel that stress in your feet. Now, most of the time you ignore it because you've become so conditioned to it, so used to it. You're habituated to it, so you don't even realize it until I point it out to you. I point out the truth of gravity, that gravity weighs you down, and you feel the pressure, the stress, the tension. You feel it in your booty. If you're sitting, particularly in this chair, I feel it at my age, this hard, uncomfortable chair. I'm trying to keep me sit so that I sit up straight and stay focused, but I can feel it in my booty. And you feel it too. Can you imagine if you can go up into space? Now, there's still gravity everywhere out there in space. It's just that you're so far from these large objects that you won't feel it, because it'll be pressing on you in all directions. So it will feel as if you are weightless, as you are no longer in gravity. The irony is, it's coming at you in all directions, because the gravity, the energy bits are everywhere in space. It's only here on the earth that you feel it, because most of them are being blocked underneath by everything beneath you, by those folks also in China. They're blocking some of those energy bits. So you feel it. But imagine being lifted in space and feeling that weightlessness, because you're far enough away from all of these large objects that the gravity that's coming at you in all directions, you're not going to feel it because of that, ironically. Imagine being weightless like that. Well, here's how you imagine it. It's at this moment, she's going to purge his mortal grossness, this weight. And how is she going to do it? And I will purge thy mortal grossness so that thou shalt like an airy spirit go. You will feel like a spirit, like a weightlessness. How is she going to accomplish this? Well, that's what you feel when you have an orgasm. For that few seconds, however long it takes, those few seconds, your mortal grossness, it's all that weight pressing you down into the earth, pressing you up and pressing you down, holding you down, pressing you on both sides. You don't feel it for those few seconds. You feel you are the spirit. This play isn't saying you'll become a spirit. She says, thou shalt like an airy spirit go. But that moment, that orgasmic moment when you experience, at the climax of the sexual act, you experience an orgasm, you feel weightless. You lose all touch with reality around you. And that includes the gravity that's holding you down. And for those few seconds, like an airy spirit, if there were such a thing as an airy spirit, that's what. You're no longer part of the physical world. It's an illusion. Illusions are real. That's how you feel. Gravity blow is still weighing you down. But just for those few seconds, that's what it must feel like to be an airy spirit. Those are great lines. She's saying, I'm going to get you back to my bower. And baby, we're going to have unimaginable sex like you've never dreamed of. And of course, Bottom, the irony here is, I don't think Bottom's ever had sex to begin with. He probably doesn't even understand what she's talking about here. You know, he's probably still thinking about those jewels of the deep that the fairies are going to fetch for him. We'll find out what those particular jewels are. The irony in that expression. But yeah, she's saying, I'm going to get you back in my bower, and we're going to make love. She's going to use that, you know, she's the romantic. We're going to make love. And you, during you've never made love with a fairy, baby. You just don't know. You just don't realize what it's like to have intercourse with a fairy, with a spirit, especially with the queen of the fairies. She knows, right? She knows her fairy business in the bedroom. So, great moment of the play. And an equally fine moment at the end of this scene, and then we'll stop for the day because it looks like I'm running out of time. Oh, I don't know. Maybe I should go on. Perhaps we should see. I'm teasing you now, aren't I? Turn to page 1364. Again, we're still in Act 3, Scene 2. This is the end of the scene here. And I'm at line 179. And again, look what Titania says. Again, you see her bribing Bottom. She says to her fairies, "Come, wait upon him. Lead him to my bower." And then she looks up at the moon. And let's not forget now the moon. Let's try to think of all the ways we might associate, all the kinds of associations we have when we think of the moon. She says, "The moon, methinks, looks with a watery eye." So she looks at the moon, and she imagines the moon is tearful. Again, she's personifying the moon here. But why is the moon weeping? The moon, methinks, looks with a watery eye. Of course, the moon is the symbol of romance and passion and desire. I mean, it's everywhere in romantic comedies. It's always there in the background. It's the backdrop here. The lovers beneath the moon. And of course, love, sex is a very important part for the romantic. Well, we know romantics, in addition to this physical thing, they imagine some spiritual connection as well. The moon, methinks, looks with a watery eye, and when she weeps every little flower. So the moon is crying, and when the moon weeps, all the little flowers cry as well. The flowers they feel the moon's unhappiness. All of nature is in union. All of nature, the flowers on the earth crying along with the moon here. And when she weeps every little flower. And why are they all in tears? Why are they all boo-hooing here? They're lamenting some enforced chastity. The moon is looking down. The flowers are weeping as well. And why are they all in such distress? Why are they so unhappy? Why are they all sobbing? It's because they're seeing all across the planet, everywhere, young lovers, something is preventing them from getting it on, from coming together, from having sex. And you know how frustrating that is, how tragic that can be. And when she weeps every little flower, lamenting some enforced chastity. Well, those poor mortals, but not Titania. She is a spirit of no common race. She's the queen of the fairies. And she don't have to worry about this chastity problem. She doesn't have to worry because she's in control. And she is in control. Look what she says here. You can see the beast come out, the dominatrix come out in these last lines. She's got sex on the brain. Look what she says. "Tie up my lover's tongue." This is a humorous moment too. I mean, she's heard Bottom speaking often enough. She's ready to have his tongue tied up. Not only because she's not going to take nay for an answer, no. She's not going to have another argument with this guy. She's going to have his tongue tied up, literally. She's commanding her fairies, tie up my lover's tongue. But here too, the suggestion You know, the dominatrix here tying the lover up. She's going to get out those whips. These are going to be the, you know, for the sadist or the masochist in the bedroom. The whips come out, and the whips can be quite pleasurable. And tie up my lover's tongue, bring him silently. Don't let him speak, don't let him object. And she's forcing him. Again, this is fairy force. She's forcing him back to her bower, where she is promised that he will very soon be purged of his mortal grossness and like an airy spirit go. Great moment in the play. So I am going to pause here, I think. Well, let me pause, and perhaps I'll come back. Yes, let me come back. Let's come back, because I've got a little time left, I see. Well, no, I don't have enough time. Sorry. I was trying to get in as much as I possibly could. But let's leave it here. We'll keep us all in suspense. Just what is going to happen in that bower in Act 4 between Titania and Bottom? Shakespeare wants to, he's aroused our curiosity, hasn't he? And we're going to be voyeurs. Like Oberon, we're going to witness what goes on in Titania's private bower. And we'll stop here today, and we'll pick up next time. Ask yourself, do you want to see what's going to go on in Titania's bower between the fairy queen and the jackass? How desirous are you to get a look-see there? Who are you?